A big hello to everyone watching. My name is Alex, and you are on the Classic Cars Roast channel. Today we're dissecting a real piece of work, the 1964 Buick Wildcat. Now, if you're a fan of big, brutish cars that used to rule the roads, this one might catch your attention. But let's not kid ourselves. It's a mixed bag of nostalgia and mediocrity, and I'm here to pull no punches. First off, the market situation for these behemoths is heating up like a summer day in the South. Prices for well-maintained examples are creeping into the $30,000 to $50,000 range, which is absurd for a car that was once just a luxury cruiser for folks who wanted to feel important. We're talking about a car that's become a favorite among collectors purely because it's rare, not because it's particularly good. You see, the Wildcat was available with a couple of engine options, including the 425 cubic inch V8, which produced a laughable 340 gross horsepower. If you think that's impressive, remember that we're living in a world where high-compression engines were left behind in 1970. The compression ratio on this beast? A pitiful 7.6 to 1. For me, that's a glaring red flag. The automotive world has moved on, but here we are, drooling over something that barely qualifies as a muscle car in today's standards. Now, availability is another story. You might come across a few of these floating around, but good luck finding one that's untouched. The originality doctrine is crucial here. It's only original once, and if you stumble upon a Wildcat that's been repainted or modified, just walk away. I've seen too many cars butchered by so-called restorations, and for me, a repainted body is an immediate no. Game over. And can we talk about the interior? It's a blend of the mundane and the bizarre. You have this horizontal speedometer that looks like it was designed by an intern with no experience. The seats? Bench seats were standard, which means you're basically sliding around like you're in a boat. Sure, there are bucket seats available, but who are we kidding? You're not buying a Wildcat for spirited driving. You want to lounge and pretend you're living the high life. So here's the kicker. While this car has a certain brutal charm, it's hard to justify the prices being asked when you consider the flaws. Common rust spots and electrical gremlins are just the cherry on top of this mediocre sundae. The bottom line is, if you're looking to invest, make sure you know what you're getting into. Would I buy one? Only if I had deep pockets and a soft spot for nostalgia. What about you? All right, buckle up, folks, because we're diving deep into the creation story of the 1964 Buick Wildcat, and trust me, this is a tale that deserves some serious scrutiny. The Wildcat was born in an era when the automotive landscape was shifting dramatically. Picture this. It's the early 1960s, and America is buzzing with energy. The post-war boom is in full swing, and everyone wants a slice of that automotive pie. But here's the kicker. The Wildcat was Buick's attempt to step up in a market that was starting to get crowded with flashy competitors. It was introduced as a standalone model in 1963, but let's be real, it was a last-ditch effort to reclaim some of that bygone glory when they were kings of the road. The Wildcat rolled onto the scene with a swagger, flaunting a full-size sedan body that offered two-door and four-door variants, plus convertible options. You had your choice of some slick factory colors like Arctic White and Wildcat Red, but behind this glamour, the reality was a bit more complex. Buick was trying to straddle the line between luxury and performance, but they were also caught in the malaise of what would soon become a sad decline in the American automotive industry. The Wildcat came equipped with a few powerful options, like the 425 cubic inch V8 engine, which promised a respectable 340 horsepower, but it was all a facade. The truth is, this was the beginning of the end for high-compression V8s. The golden age of muscle was fading fast, and the Wildcat was a victim of this shift. They even went as far as using the Super Turbine 400 transmission, which is a precursor to the Turbo Hydromatic 400. That's a good thing, right? But it's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. The Wildcat had to compete with monsters like the Ford Mustang and Chevrolet Camaro, and it was clear that it was losing its edge. The styling was sharp, but inside, you could find yourself staring at a dashboard that was practical but lacked the flair of its competitors. The interior design was all about simplicity. horizontal speedometers, and bench seats. But come on, for a car trying to make a statement, that's just pathetic. So, what's the takeaway here? The Wildcat is a classic representation of a time when American manufacturers were trying to hold on to their legacy, but instead, they were just digging their own graves. It's a car that embodies the struggle of the era, trying to be everything to everyone while losing sight of what made them great in the first place. Would you really want to put your money into a relic from a company that was already losing its grip on the market? Think about that before you dive headfirst into the Wildcat dream. All right, folks, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the exterior of the 1964 Buick Wildcat. Now, first off, this car was a statement piece, no doubt. You've got a full-size sedan with options for 2-door and 4-door variants. It's like Buick thought, why not have it all? But the truth is, while it's bold, it's also got a few glaring issues that need addressing, and I'm not holding back. Look at the factory colors: Arctic white, glacier blue, Wildcat red, bamboo cream, you name it. They had the palette to make a splash, but here's the catch. If it's not in mint condition, that flashy color is just a cover-up for rust issues, and believe me, these cars are notorious for it. You'll find common rust spots rotting away the lower door panels, trunk floor, and around the rear wheel wells. So if you're thinking about picking one up, check that paint job closely. A repainted body? Game over for me. Immediate no right there. Now, the grille. The 1964 model sports a horizontal bar design with a central division. It's an attempt at elegance, but it's just so predictable. I mean, come on, Buick. You're a luxury brand. Give us something that stands out. And those bumpers? They're chrome-wrapped and wraparound. Sure, they add a touch of class, but also a hefty weight that drags down performance. You're not driving a tank, but with those bumpers, you might as well be. As for the body lines, the sweeping side trim is an interesting choice. It gives an impression of grace, but in reality, it's an attempt to distract from the overall bulky proportions that scream, "I'm a relic of the past." The whole design feels like it's trying way too hard to keep up with the times while actually being stuck in the Malaise era, that sad decline of American auto manufacturing that started in the 1970s. And let's not forget the interior. The dashboard layout is simple and practical, but if you're looking for flair, you'll be sorely disappointed. It's like Buick just didn't care enough to put in the effort. A horizontal speedometer? Really? So, what's the verdict? The exterior of the 1964 Buick Wildcat is a mixed bag. It's got the potential for brutal charm, but it's also a canvas for rust and mediocrity. If you find one that's been cared for, maybe, just maybe, it's worth a look. But personally, I'm not sold. Would you take the plunge on this one? All right, buckle up because we're diving into the interior of the 1964 Buick Wildcat, a space that's either going to thrill you or make you cringe. First off, let's talk about that dashboard. It's a horizontal speedometer setup that's simple, practical, and frankly, a little dull. I mean, where's the flair? With all the chrome and character on the outside, you'd expect the inside to match that vibe, but it feels like Buick ran out of steam. The gauges, while functional, lack the kind of pizzazz you'd hope for in a classic car. Now the smell. Oh boy, the smell. A vintage car should have that intoxicating aroma of old leather and nostalgia, right? Instead, what you might get is a whiff of mildew mixed with a hint of what I can only describe as well-loved. If the interior has been neglected, it's a serious turnoff. My rule? If the interior smells like a damp basement, it's a hard pass for me. Comfort-wise, the seat situation is pretty standard. You've got bench seats as a default, which is fine if you like to cozy up with your passengers, but if you're after something sportier, you could opt for those bucket seats with a center console. The design feels a bit dated, but hey, it's classic. Just remember, if you're over 6 feet tall, you might find yourself feeling a bit cramped. The tilt steering wheel is a nice touch, though. Definitely a plus for those of us who want to avoid back strain while cruising. Then there's the vacuum-powered temperature control. Sounds fancy, right? But in reality, it's just a fancy way of saying that it might break down on you at the worst possible moment. You're left praying that it doesn't decide to blow hot air on a summer day or freeze you out in winter. And let's not forget about electrical issues. The voltage regulator and alternator problems are notorious in these models, and if you're not careful, you could end up with a car that won't start when you want to show it off. The common rust spots around the lower door panels and trunk floor can also be a deal breaker. After all, when you're shelling out cash for a classic, you expect it to be in good shape inside and out. So what do you think? Is the interior of the 1964 Buick Wildcat a nostalgic embrace or just a letdown? It's all about what you value in a classic ride. All right, folks, gather round because it's time to talk about the engine of the 1964 Buick Wildcat. And trust me, this is where the rubber meets the road, or in this case, where the power meets the pavement, or what's left of it. Now, if you're looking for raw horsepower, you might want to turn your attention elsewhere, because the story here is a bit of a letdown. The Wildcat came with two engine options, both from the Nailhead family, and let's just say they weren't exactly setting the world on fire. First up, we've got the 401 cubic inch V8, which might sound impressive until you realize it only churns out a meager 325 gross horsepower. That's right, 325? And if you think that's bad, the torque is a somewhat respectable 445 pound-feet. But let's be honest, you could use a bit more oomph when you're behind the wheel of a car that's supposed to embody the American muscle spirit. When you're driving a vehicle that weighs a ton, you need that torque to haul it around like a champ. Now, if you're feeling a bit frisky and want to step up your game, you could opt for the 425 cubic inch V8 known as the Wildcat 465. This beast offers a slightly more impressive 340 gross horsepower and a torque rating of 465 pound-feet. Sounds great, right? Well, hold your horses, because even with these numbers, the performance isn't exactly jaw-dropping. We're talking about a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of around 8 seconds. In the grand scheme of muscle cars, that's pretty pedestrian, especially when you consider that 1970 was the last great year for high-compression V8s, and the Wildcat was already starting to show signs of malaise. And don't even get me started on the Super Turbine 400 transmission. Sure, it's a precursor to the legendary Turbo Hydromatic 400, but it's not quite there yet. You can feel the difference in shifts, and it just doesn't have that silky smoothness that you crave from an automatic transmission. So, what's the takeaway here? If you're looking for a performance powerhouse, the Wildcat might not be your best bet. But if you're after a slice of classic Americana with a bit of history, it definitely has its charm. Just don't expect to be blowing past anyone at the stoplight. You'll be more likely to be the one left in the dust. When you think about the heart of a classic car, you often picture a beastly engine roaring to life, but in the case of the 1964 Buick Wildcat, the real story lies in the mechanical setup that's as questionable as a cheap bar's last call. So, let's dig into the transmission and rear axle because, frankly, this is where things take a turn for the worse. First up, the Super Turbine 400. Now, before you get excited, let's be real. It's a precursor to the illustrious Turbo Hydromatic 400, which is the best automatic transmission ever built. But this, my friends, is not that. The Super Turbine 400 is like the shadow of the king, a wannabe that doesn't quite cut the mustard. It's a 3-speed automatic that's fine for cruising, but lacks the punch you'd expect from a car with Wildcat in its name. You want that smooth, assertive shift that puts you back in your seat. Instead, you get a lagging transmission that feels like it's more interested in taking a leisurely stroll than unleashing power on the streets. Now let's talk about the rear axle. The Wildcat offered a range of axle ratios from 2.78 to 3.91, which sounds great on paper, but in reality is a disappointing compromise. The 2.78 ratio is nothing short of pathetic. You might as well be driving a station wagon with the way it lumbers off the line. And while the higher 3.91 ratio gives you a bit of pep, it's still not enough to redeem the lackluster performance this car is known for. You see, the entire setup is a prime example of how the Malaise era began to creep into the automotive world. 1970 was the last great year for high-compression V8s, and boy, do those numbers show it. Imagine trying to enjoy the thrill of the open road only to be met with a transmission that seems to have the enthusiasm of a sloth. Every time you hit the gas, you're reminded of the good old days when cars had some real muscle and character. The Wildcat's rear axle ratios don't help either. They're more of a dull whisper than the roar you'd expect from a classic. For me, a lackluster transmission and rear axle are immediate deal breakers. If I'm behind the wheel of a classic, I want to feel the power, not just a suggestion of it. So, what do you think? Would you settle for a car that's more about cruising than carving up the asphalt? In a world filled with better options, it's hard to justify this mechanical mismatch. It's a shame because the Wildcat had the potential, yet here we are talking about how it fell short in the most critical aspects. All right, folks, it's time to get into the nitty-gritty of the suspension, brakes, and handling of the 1964 Buick Wildcat. If you're thinking this is where it all gets better, prepare for some harsh truths. The Wildcat was built during a time when American cars were still trying to balance luxury with performance, but this model seems to have forgotten the performance part entirely. First off, the suspension setup is about as basic as it gets. You've got a front independent suspension with coil springs and a rear leaf spring setup. Now, don't get me wrong, the ride is smooth, but it's like gliding on a cloud of cotton candy. You want to feel the road, not float above it like it's a carnival ride. The steering is vague at best, and when you turn, you feel more like you're piloting a ship than driving a car. It's like Buick thought, why bother with precision when you can just make it comfortable? Now, let's talk about brakes. Spoiler alert, they're not exactly confidence-inspiring. Drum brakes were the name of the game back then, and while they do the job in a straight line, good luck in a panic stop. You might as well be trying to stop a freight train. For me, a car that can't stop properly is a massive red flag. I can't tell you how many times I've been in situations where the brakes just gave up. The Wildcat's handling? Pathetic. This car was not designed for spirited driving. Instead, it leans like a teenager at a school dance, making every corner feel like an exercise in patience. What really gets me is that cars from the mid-60s to early 70s handled much, much better than this. It's like Buick took a step back from the glory days of high-compression engines and performance handling. The Wildcat seems to embody the Malaise era mentality, where power was sacrificed for comfort, and now we're left with a car that just doesn't deliver. You might feel like a king behind the wheel, but the moment you hit the gas or turn the wheel, reality smacks you in the face. So if you're considering the Wildcat, think long and hard about what you want from a classic car. Do you want a luxurious cruiser that can barely handle a corner? Or are you craving something that actually delivers a thrilling driving experience? For me, it's a no-brainer. This car screams nostalgia, but it also whispers mediocrity. When we talk about the reliability of the 1964 Buick Wildcat, we need to be brutally honest. It's a mixed bag at best. Sure, the power of the Nailhead engine is impressive on paper, but let's not forget that this car comes from an era where rust was practically a standard feature. The common rust spots on the lower door panels, trunk floor, and around the rear wheel wells are basically a rite of passage for these old beasts. If you find one that's been well maintained and hasn't succumbed to the elements, consider yourself lucky. But for me, if I see signs of rust, it's an immediate disqualifier. Who wants to deal with a car that's been slowly eaten away by time? And then there are the electrical issues. Problems with the voltage regulator and alternator can crop up, and let's be honest, no one wants to be stranded because of some archaic electrical gremlin. The power steering pump leaks are another sad truth. These are not the robust machines of yesteryear. They're prone to the wear and tear of age like anything else. Now, let's address the performance aspects. The 0 to 60 miles per hour time of approximately 8 seconds is decent for a car of this size, but it's not setting the world on fire. The quarter-mile time of around 16 seconds is more of a casual stroll than a performance dash. For a classic car, this might be acceptable, but when you compare it to the raw power that was available in the earlier models, it's a stark reminder of how far we've fallen since 1970, the last great year for high-compression V8s. In terms of legacy, the Buick Wildcat does hold some weight. Its limited production numbers and luxurious styling do give it a certain appeal. Auction prices can range anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000, especially for well-maintained examples like convertibles. But let's be clear, it's only original once, and if you find a Wildcat with its original paint and parts, you've struck gold. However, if you're looking at a repainted body or a car that has seen better days, just walk away. So, should you buy a 1964 Buick Wildcat? Despite all its flaws, if you find one in decent condition for a good price, go for it. There's a certain brutal charm to these cars. They embody a hooligan streak and unapologetic character that modern cars simply lack. But remember, buying one is a gamble. You're either getting a slice of classic Americana or a money pit that will drain your wallet faster than you can say, "Rust bucket." Would I spend my money on this? Only if it's an original survivor with minimal rust and a solid powertrain. After all, who wouldn't want to own a piece of history that still manages to turn heads? If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give it a like. Leave your comments and impressions. Your opinion is very important to me. Until next time.